Armageddon is to the church what Calvary was to Christ. The hiding of God's face, threatened destruction, but ultimate deliverance. It's over the issue of worship, the key word in chapters 13 and 14 about Antichrist. The first war in the world was over worship, one man against another. Abel and Cain, the issue was how to worship. That's the main issue of life. Worship means worthship. What do we put first? Prioritization is the secret of real living, and worship is giving God his place. And Armageddon is the final war about worship. Will we worship the Creator, or will we worship creatures, often demonic creatures, wicked creatures? The word Armageddon only occurs once in the Bible, but the word Megiddo occurs 13 times. 13 is the Bible number for rebellion. 12 is the kingdom number. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 disciples. But 13, Judas was the 13th man in the upper room. 13 equals rebellion. And Megiddo is a symbolic place. It was a real geographical site, but it becomes a symbol in the scripture for the conflict between good and evil worship. And all the way through the Bible, the final Armageddon is typified or prophesied. We've mentioned Genesis 4, the first bloodshed over worship. You remember chapter 32, time of Jacob's trouble? You know, Christ spoke about Armageddon as time of great tribulation, such as the world had ever known. The book of Jeremiah called it the time of Jacob's trouble, and he says there's none like it. So Jacob's wrestling with God is typical of the way the saints who remember their sins and they wonder if God can really deliver them because they're not as good as they want to be. So Jacob's wrestling and God giving him the name Israel is typical of Armageddon. And if you read the book of Joshua, you read how God sent great hailstones out of heaven to destroy people that would destroy his people. And in the book of Revelation, when it mentions the 7 last plagues, at the climax, great hailstones come down at Armageddon to destroy the wicked. In the book of Judges, chapter 5, the sun-worshipping Midianites attacked the Sabbath-keeping Israelites. But Judges 5 says the stars in their courses fought against Sisera and his host by the waters of Megiddo, typical of Armageddon. And all the way through the Bible, we have pictures that are to remind us of the great conflict yet to come. Daniel chapter 3 tells of an image set up by Babylon. Everyone commanded to worship it. That's a type of Revelation 13, where you have the image of the beast. Everyone commanded to worship it. You remember Daniel said, or his friends said, our God will deliver us. And in chapter 6, where Daniel himself is threatened with death because he won't worship the union of church and state in the Babylon of his day, Daniel said, my God will deliver me. And it's fascinating to find that in the 12th chapter of this book, it says, at that time there'll be a time of trouble, talking about the end of the world. But Michael shall stand up, and thy people shall be delivered, everyone written in the book. So Daniel 12, talking about the last Armageddon, uses a key word in Daniel 3 and 6, where God's saints who refuse to worship the creature rather than the creator are delivered all the way through the Bible. Ezekiel 9 is worth our study. Zechariah chapter 3, which is symbolic portrayal of the Day of Atonement and its relationship to Calvary. These are worth studying. 1 Kings 18, Elijah's battle with Jezebel and the false prophet was slain by the waters of Megiddo. And when you come near the end of the Old Testament history and you read the book of Esther, you have a typical Antichrist, Haman, who helps rule the government of Medo-Persia. And his complaint to the king is, there's a people scattered through your provinces and they don't keep your laws. They have their own laws and they keep them. They should be destroyed. And so a law goes forth that those who don't keep the king's laws, these are types of Antichrist and Armageddon, should be destroyed. But ultimately, the enemy is destroyed. And Israel has a glad day, a happy day, a holiday, typical of deliverance of God's saints at the end of time. I'd like to read you two statements from very well-known scholars with reference to the abomination of desolation, which is Daniel's name for Antichrist. The first statement I read you is from Jeremias. The abomination of desolation in the holy place, demanding worship and reverence, glorified by false prophets through word and miracle. This is the last great temptation. That's a great summary about Armageddon. And here from a much older commentator, Christopher Wordsworth, cousin to the poet, he said, talking about the abomination of desolation, Antichrist, some form of infidelity and impiety will be established by law, even in the Christian church, as our Lord himself foretells in Matthew 24:15. That's where he spoke about the abomination of desolation, standing in the holy place, foretold by Daniel the prophet. And Jesus said, whoever reads, make sure you understand it. That's not a comment from the gospel writers. Gospel writers don't add their own comments. Comment from Jesus. Wordsworth concludes with this: so will it be in the last times. The church itself will be betrayed by some in high places in her ministry, and by means of their timid and treacherous concessions and compromises, it will be polluted by a form of worship which will make it execrable in the sight of God, and will cause all good men to weep and hide their faces in shame and sorrow, and to forsake the courts of the sanctuary. Dear friend, none of us know when we'll breathe our last breath. That's really only a stone's throw from each of us. But every day we have to fight evil. That's our Armageddon. And the only way to resist the evil that's inborn in us is to be in love with Jesus Christ, who loved us and gave himself for us. You know, at the end of the Bible, Revelation 22, verses 6 to 21, you have an epilogue, and it's very similar to the prologue in chapter 1. Those who deny the deity of Christ will find their answer in these passages, both of which call him the Alpha and Omega, and in chapter 1 he's called the Almighty. He's God. Dear friends, in ourselves we're weak. But Paul could say that out of weakness we're made strong by looking unto Jesus. And we have such hope. This great book of Revelation closes with a beautiful picture. The last 3 chapters of the Bible, very much like the first 3, they both speak about a new heaven and new earth. 3rd chapter from the beginning, you have death, sin, the serpent. 3rd chapter from the end, 3rd last chapter of Revelation, the end of sin, the end of death, the end of the serpent. Wonderful unity in the Bible. But then it goes on to say, God will dwell with his people, and there'll be no more death, no sighing, no crying, no more sin. Isn't that an objective worth fighting for? By looking unto Jesus and not trusting in our own sinful natures. Dear friend, I pray for you that God will make it so for you and for me. God bless you.